morning, everyone. So nice to see everyone's faces. I want to welcome you to this morning's session titled Defining the Metaverse. I am Marshall Kirkpatrick. I'm a VP of Research at Sprinkler, and I'm very excited today to sit with David Treat, who runs the blockchain and XR programs at Accenture. Has recently taken responsibility for their Metaverse business. And we are really in for an in-depth view of this emerging space, because David's got a great leadership position at a company that is leading the world and the industry in Metaverse matters. A quick review of the management consulting literature shows that Accenture has written more about the Metaverse than any of the other management consulting firms in the world. They have published extensively on the subject, including a report that I'm going to drop a link to here in the chat on emerging trends, including the Metaverse. And it is one of the most delightful things I have read in quite some time. The way that they connect the Metaverse to offline and real world human social well-being and human connection to the earth just made my heart sing. So that was a delightful thing to read. And David, I'm so excited to spend this time with you here at FIRE.
No, thanks, Marshall, and thanks for your kind words. We're certainly proud of the Fjord Trends piece, and there's more to come. So we're gonna keep rolling out our perspectives and capabilities over the weeks and months. So look for more.
Will do. That's exciting. So David, we're going to talk about the big picture and what the Metaverse means, but I wonder if we could start with something a little more personal and specific, just to get a feel for things. I want to ask what your favorite part of the Metaverse is. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for the question. We were talking about this a little bit in the green room. So one of the places that that our team has built, we have a whole set of Accenture places that we've built that we're using internally and with clients. We actually have the largest implementation of XR headset or VR headsets that we announced a number of months ago. So at this point, I think we're up to about 35,000 employees enabled with headsets, on our way to 60,000 shortly, and then we're gonna quickly enable as much of our 675,000 people as we can over time. So we built a bunch of these places, and one of them, my favorite one, and it's a bit of a running joke within my team. I usually find myself at least once a day going to one of the places that we built that was designed around an actual scan of the Swiss mountains. It's set at dusk, at sunset, from a well-being perspective and just my ability to recenter myself in the day. I will go to that place and I'll sit, and you can look at the stars, and there's a campfire, and I'll just be for a little bit, and it does lower my blood pressure, and it helps me get centered. And then the running joke is my team knows to find me there, and so I'll every once in a while someone else will pop in, and we'll have these impromptu conversations, and that notion of convening in a place. And then in the true spirit of being unbounded in the digital world and what the Metaverse is going to unlock, there's also a basketball court that you can walk over to and shoot hoops under the stars, and just have a little bit of fun. So that is my favorite Metaverse place right now.
That's fantastic. Yes, if your meditation sessions are accompanied only by music in the background, check out what David's doing. That's inspiring. That's awesome. So David, let's talk about the Metaverse in big picture terms. I think a lot of people here will wonder, is this for real this time? It feels like the Metaverse was something that people have been talking about in literature, have been talking about online. 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Why now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and of course we all always very cognizant of I've always loved the Gartner hype cycle, and is this yet setting us up for yet another trough of disillusionment around around where we're headed? But I think not. I think there has been something that has changed from a technical perspective, and I think it's really twofold. I think on one hand, on one hand that the hardware has dramatically improved, right? That and what's coming is going to be an even bigger improvement. And so still clunky, right? It's still a big piece of hardware to put on your head if you're gonna be in virtual reality. But you're starting to see the snippets of what something as elegant as the glasses that I'm wearing on my face, where we're headed in that regard. So I think the hardware advancements has been on a steadily improving state, and what's coming, what's available now, if you're willing to pay the price, right, is 5K resolution, document readable, level of resolution in a space, and that's really different, and that'll continue to improve more and more and more. But I think from a metaverse perspective, and I know we'll get to kind of more of the definition side of it, but to the other thing that's changed is the notion of being able to achieve persistence, right? That adding XR plus blockchain in these places to be able to have object persistence, that the intent, I wouldn't say it's a reality yet, the intent to be able to take the credentials of my identity, the objects that I own in the digital world, and to be able to traverse from place to place to place, opens up a set of functionality that isn't there if you're just talking VR or XR. And so adding the advancements in the hardware plus the ability to have provable ownership and uniqueness of digital objects, and to be able to start to carry them with each other, I think then it is wildly different than what we've had to work with over the past couple of decades, and is now unlocking a lot of that enthusiasm of actually being able to transact and have commerce and make it more functional. So we're at the beginning. I don't want to overplay, right? There's a lot of stuff that's still being envisioned, but what I'm seeing, and I have the benefit of the multiple teams around, is the building blocks are there now. So we're now focusing on that connective tissue and that interoperability and the standards and the policies, and that's super exciting.
Well, let's not go a moment further without talking about that definition question. As one of the people most engaged in this, on helping connect so many different organizations, doing so much work in this space, what's your definition of the metaverse?
Yeah. Thanks. And yes, let's start there. We very much see it as an evolution, and the combination of existing capabilities, as I was just describing. It's XR, it's blockchain, it's edge, it's IoT, it'll AI, cloud, right? It's the combinatorial value of those things coming together to change our digital experience from browsing and serving up two-dimensional flat experiences for the individual from source code, right? When I log on to whatever it is I log on to today in our existing digital world, it's being served up for my purposes around what I'm entitled to see, and what my logon credentials unlock, and it's browsing. And we're moving now to having the potential to move from browsing to participating and persistent spaces. And if there's one way that I'm helping clients kind of very tactically feel the difference in that, is when I log on to, whether I'm logging onto a system or browsing the internet today, it never crosses my mind to ask the one question that I always ask when I go to one of our metaverse places, which is, hey, who's here? Right? That simple notion of going to a metaverse place and asking the fundamental question of, hey, who else is here, and looking around, that's what's different. The notion of having a persistent place where you can convene, you can interact with others, and it's a shared, multi-party experience in a persistent place with persistent objects. That's what's different.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And sorry, let me keep the mic for a
Please,
couple of
go
seconds.
ahead.
You know, the other thing that's super important, and you'll see in all of our pieces, it also is a range of experiences, right? The metaverse has to be productive, that the range of of augmented physical to virtual, the range of consumer consumer to consumer, business to business to business, the range of technologies, as I was describing, and our ability to traverse between them. And so, if I were to, let me share just one more anecdote, right? Let's just think of some use cases as to why that whole notion of place, internet of place and internet of ownership drives real change. Let's take the utility line worker out in the field who needs instructions in the moment as to don't touch this, do turn that, that's an issue, this isn't. And to be able to put on a headset, see the augmented reality overlay of what they're looking at in the fields that gives those potentially life-saving instructions of that's a hot wire, that's not, this knob, that not that knob. And then identify an issue and say, actually, I need to talk to a few other people, and be able to go from an augmented reality to a virtual reality and suddenly be in a command center like environments to be able to discuss with 3 other stakeholders, in a very immersive, collaborative way, pull up data that they look at together and act as if they got back in their truck, drove back to the home office and went into the conference room, but they're still in the field. And they're able to bring that field information into that control center dialogue, and then take the headset off and back into a physically augmented space and take the actions that are needed to be taken. That whole notion of bringing our digital experiences into the context of our lives in wherever we are, I think is what's truly special and different. We've done so many amazing things to depersonalize the digital world and isolate ourselves in front of a in front of a screen to look at data. And this is actually, using digital to get us back into physical world context to actually really dramatically, when done right, help each other and ourselves in that actual physical world context.
So that's what you refer to life outside of the metaverse as the physical world?
Yes.
And you've got a vision of the metaverse working in service and in support of a better physical world.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that we also are investing heavily into is we have a unique window of time here. And it really is a limited window of time for us to, as an entire community, to decide what are our societal values by which we want to design these new enhanced experiences. And it needs to go across that spectrum of ethics, of diversity, of inclusion, of sustainability, of just base security and safety. And so one of the other things that we're really heavily driving and investing into is convening those forums to really evaluate, where are our frustrations with how the digital world has developed to date, and raise those tough questions, because I do think, again, it's a unique moment in time before we're at scale with solutions and can reshape it against what our global and local societal values are. And so convening those conversations is going to be super important. And then there's assets to be built to support it.
That sounds great. And instead of just a free-for-all libertarian site of danger, it sounds like learning from some of the early social web experiences and cultivating a cared for social experience here in the metaverse is something that you all are working on.
Yeah, and just just maybe one more click on what those assets are, right? We don't have that interoperability, in practice yet. We don't have the safe custody, truly scalable, secure, safe custody of those digital objects yet, right? It's lots of work still to be done, and the investment into an open source foundation for it, the open standards for it to develop, and and again, those dialogues to make sure that it all progresses in a way that it reinforces those our collective societal values is going to be super important, lest we end up in the even more walled garden construct, which is antithetical to what the whole innovation wave is all about.
How will the diversity of values, you think, be represented and supported in that? I mean, there's such a spectrum of values in the physical world.
Let me this won't work for everyone, but for those for whom it does work, or you can for those I have young kids, they love obviously loved animated movies. I do find myself going back to a little bit of the analog of what Wreck-It Ralph created. And for those of you who haven't seen it, let me kind of set it up, right? Wreck-It Ralph is this kind of fun story of the avatars within individual games actually being able to go through the wires that connect those games into a gamer central. And as part of the storyline, right, Ralph is in one game and he actually leaves and goes into other games. And of course, other games have different rules. Gravity works differently. You can, you're going from a driving game to a first-person shooter game to a, the punchline here is the metaverse places that we build are going to have to care for what are the laws, regulations, societal values, and rules of the different places. And how much do we want to drive consistently across all places? Are there base minimal societal values that we commonly share as to rules of conduct? And I think there are quite a few, right? Some of what's out there right now around the notion of sexual assault in the metaverse, right? The notion of appropriate action, appropriate touch. I think we can decide upon some common principles of acceptable societal behavior, and let's drive those standards consistently. But then local communities will have wildly different societal values around data privacy, around what's shared, not shared, right? Just look at the regulation around the world, the differences between a US context, a GDPR context in Europe versus a context in China. All of their laws and regulations will need to be respected within the metaverse places and communities. And that tie into where are you accessing the metaverse from a physical world perspective tees up a really interesting dynamic that we're going to have to create, an approach for. The best analog that we're living through today, I could share from a US perspective, is some states have approved online gambling and some haven't. For the Super Bowl in Connecticut, where I live, I was able to go onto DraftKings and place a bet on the Super Bowl, just fine. But had I driven, 30 minutes north of Massachusetts, I couldn't. And so there's a physical world limitation on a digital world place around what I'm allowed or not allowed to do, as we envision obviously the metaverse is unbounded with respect to be able to, from a pure perspective of being able to convene digitally from anywhere, and gather groups, and that's tremendously valuable. But what expectations will those users bring with them around those societal values? And then how do we traverse that notion of, do we apply local law and regulation based on the physical point of access from the user's perspective? These are tough questions that are ahead of us, and we're investing heavily into the convening and the discussions and the assets that'll support it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, with a note of trigger warning, I would actually suggest that the social dialogue and transformations around understanding of gender power dynamics and sexual violence, for example, is something that this new space may offer an opportunity to progress things around. Can we chat about identity? You've discussed portability, and what about mutability? What about the opportunity to have multiple identities? And is anonymity a factor? Is the metaverse anonymous?
Yeah, it's my personal view on this is it very much needs to be as complex as it is in our physical world, right? And let's just take one thread of that around transactions, and let's go with financial transactions because money for the metaverse is a real thing, right? So if I walk into the corner store and I want to buy, a sandwich and a candy bar, I can use physical cash, slide it across the table. The merchant doesn't have to know my name. I don't have to know their name. There's an anonymity, around the use of physical cash, and there's some, that we could have a discussion as to how much we value that or not. Go to the other end of the spectrum where, whether it's, the very, pertinent topic today of financial sanctions or, AML KYC and all of the dimensions of, needing to know the counterparty to a transaction and being able to have that confidence as to who they are and the exchange of value, right? We have a very complex, construct in our physical world experiences that absolutely will have to be addressed in a metaverse experience. So it will not be binary. It will not be that the metaverse can be completely anonymous as we add more functionality to it and have to be able to definitively, in certain instances, definitively know who our counterparty is and follow, again, a set of societal expectations, laws, and regulations for those transactions. And in other instances, really benefit from that, not even just anonymity, but even from an empathy and interaction perspective, the enormous value for all of us to show up in a metaverse place as being, as all looking the same, right? As all of the, there's some really creative things that have been, have obviously been done in the space of hiring, right? Blinding gender from resumes in the recruiting process, the ability to, to remove aspects of gender and age and other protected classes from the application and recruiting process. That ability in the metaverse is just magnificent, right? Like if you wanted to convene in a place where, should we choose, right? And there's, all sorts of different permutations, but if we all wanted to show up in a place and be the same, same height, all purple, with all the same haircut and just interact on the quality of our content, that's enabled. If you want to actually put people in put people in the shoes of others, right? Not just walk a mile in someone else's shoes, but walk a mile in someone else's avatar, right? So, I'm a 6 foot, relatively old white guy, right? If I could put myself in the, let's pretend I'm a police officer and I wanted to put myself in the avatar of members of the community that I'm policing. We've done work with police work where we've taken that 6'5" white police officer and put them in the avatar of the 8-year-old Black child in their community and let them flip back and forth and actually experience interactions from each perspective, right? Those are super, the empathy that comes from those kinds of experiences is measurable and valuable. And so, and everything in between, right? Our ability to choose and select how we show up in the environment that we're showing up against the backdrop of the laws, rules, and societal expectations is going to then require a set of technical assets to support that. And so we're investing heavily into digital identity, the pattern around self-managed digital identity, and that interplay to be able to carry, my ability to carry with me those credentials of, whether it's as basic as, the State Department giving me my passport, my driver's license from the DMV, my university credential, or my skills credentials from my training, my ability to carry a set of credentials and then choose with whom to share them for what purpose in these experiences and bounce that up against the laws and expectations of the transaction. That is a societal value, process, architecture, consumer experience. That is a rich frontier of work ahead of us to get that right.
Oh, that's delightful. It brings to mind, on the flip side of the power dynamic from the police officer, what Indigenous people refer to with the phrase free, prior, and informed consent around, in this case, progressive disclosure of matters of identity. That's super exciting. David, will you talk to us a little bit about the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning in building the metaverse?
Yeah, it's some of it's obvious, some of it I think is very much ahead of us to develop. So let's just start with your focus on the building of the metaverse, right? There's a really interesting, we're doing a lot of volumetric scanning of, we've scanned all of our offices now, and actually you can go to the actual San Francisco office and walk the office as you would see it in the physical world. And that has a bunch of really interesting use cases as it pertains to the human experience of. Sorry, I'm going sideways. I will get to the answer to the question. But I'm trying to plan a summer vacation right now. Right, when I go to the hotel website and I choose type of room, I don't really know what I'm getting. Right, our ability to actually volumetrically scan those rooms of the actual hotel and the actual view out of the window, and actually pick the actual floor and the actual direction, and to be able to see the configuration of the room, suddenly now that hotel chain is going to benefit from much closer expectation and even pricing and et cetera. And I'm going to know exactly what it's going to be like. And I'm going to be that much more enthused to actually buy that particular room. When you think about that volumetric scanning of physical world places, and the creation of these metaverse places, from a physical world, mapping perspective, we can either 3D scan everything, or put my avatar, in an environment with 100 cameras around me to be able to capture all my motion. Or of course, we can use the advancements around AI and machine learning to take basically figure out the rest of the image and render it off of a single camera view. And so that ability to use AI to do that, to be able to just more rapidly think all of the advancements in CAD design, to be able to just apply the laws of spaces and places to be developed. Another really important frontier. And then of course on the content management side, we will have just as much content management, monitoring, control, and responsibility as we do in any of the existing social media and platforms. And the ability to do that using AI and machine learning, I think is going to be the only practical way forward at scale, because you just can't have human brute force for content management in an online environment is obviously inefficient at scale.
But it's very difficult on the people staffing that function, notably, right?
The mental anguish of doing, yes, exactly.
That resonates with what we heard, I believe, at the end of Tuesday here at FIRE. There was a speaker speaking about the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, with a strong focus on volumetric estimation and computer vision. And what a good articulation of how that'll be deployed here in the metaverse. That's great. Can you talk to us a little bit about what this means for work? Here we are in Zoom. Are we going to be meeting in the metaverse? Will those meetings be better? Will they be worse? Will they be different? How should we think about things like employee experience and the future of work in the metaverse?
Yeah, we are incredibly bullish about this, and some of it informed by the fact that we have such a large implementation right now of headsets, and our employees are starting to work in the metaverse. And so Accenture is we're a knowledge worker organization, which is for us, right, through COVID, Zoom and Teams and being able to interact like this has been fantastic, massively accelerated for us. The early experiences of gathering in a metaverse space in full virtual reality, we're really quite excited as to what one can do with that. It may be overly trite, but the basic notion of a picture's worth 1,000 words, overlaid onto how do you actually manage a system, right? How do you take data from a governance and management perspective of an organization and all of its systems? Today we look at Excel files and rows of data. We look at pie charts and we look at graphs and the like. we're starting to do some, some of the mind-bending, notions of, well, actually, if I'm able to create a digital twin of the whole system, and I'm actually, able to do the, connect the data flows into that digital twin so that I can be in either augmented or virtual reality context and see the live system in action. And be able to, use the human brain to be able to, draw much more quick insights, and make decisions. And then where we're going next is then to be able to take actions. That ability to be immersed in the, the moving parts of an enterprise system that today it's really hard to get your hands around when you got to look at, PowerPoint presentations of of static information from 4 different parts of your business, or even the portals that have been thrown up, about an individual, part of the business. And so, I shared the line worker analogy at the beginning of kind of that interplay between field workers and control towers and management teams. I think that's a rich frontier. I think as what I just described of being able to have digital twins of systems to immerse yourself in the system itself and the data is going to be wildly impactful. But the other thing that we're just finding is for those that get up the learning curve on being in headset. And there is a learning curve, right? There's a, there can be a discomfort or the like. Time moves differently. The interactions become very natural. Once you get past I'm kind of stunned as to, what, the environment that I'm standing in, we're finding the quality of those interactions, are just much better than what we're facing here, right? So and I'll stop and I'll stop here in a second, but the dynamics of right now, I'm looking at body language in 2D of people on a screen. It gives me some information to be able to modify what I'm saying or how I'm engaged. In these metaverse places, right? In the ones that we've all built, you have the auditory experience of, if I move closer to someone, they get louder. If I move further from someone, they get softer. I'm able to see head movement of who's actually looking at me, and and their hand gestures if they're holding, if they're holding the the hand devices. The physical cues, the interactions are basic today, and they're getting and where they're headed is going to be a quality of information to support actual convening and actual relationship building that is going to be, we're a ways away from it being as great as if we were all physically in the same room, but it's going to be miles better than the 2-dimensional thing that we're doing right now in this meeting.
That's great. Let's drill down a little deeper into that, if you will, specifically within the context of this conference. So here at the Future in Review, there are lots of people in all likelihood who think of themselves as futurists, who are increasingly doing foresight work. Evan Anderson led us in a really great workshop a couple of days ago about one model of effective research for foresight. For example, I think we can all imagine a little bit, building on some of what you've discussed regarding empathy, how the metaverse might facilitate the work of foresight. But I wonder if you could tell us more.
I'm almost following. If you let me play it back and see if I'm answering the right question. That the ability to immerse oneself in a metaverse place, and the artistry and the creativity that can go into not just the building of that place to then help help envision the future. Is that so?
Yeah.
We're doing that today. So we have live clients that are looking, they're looking to build the new building. We're doing this for Accenture. Our Accenture CIO, Jason Warnicki, talks about this all the time, and he is brilliantly applying the use of, essentially think of it as the next generation of CAD design. CAD design underpins it. He's now actually built our next Accenture spaces, and we have walked the space before a single thing was built. And it's different from looking at it in a 3-dimensional CAD design because of the level of resolution and depth and ultimately realism that one can get. go back to my hotel room example of booking the hotel room, we were able to walk around our newest office and see how the sun was gonna come through the windows. It was gonna see what does it feel like from distances, from from heights, from color palettes, from he's really quite eloquent about it, and it's been massively helpful because it saved a ton of construction costs and rework when finding things that won't work quite right or don't create the kind of experience that one would have. And again, CAD design has gotten better and better and better over the years. This is a massive leap forward because of not only can one person experience it, but we'll get the entire leadership team to tour the office before we've broken ground and actually start to have meetings in it and feel like, what does that feel like? What is it, what would be better about it? How to, what changes to make? Doing all of that in advance. Same thing for, let's go back, let's go way back, right? Shop floor design, right? How do you have efficient shop floor design to take raw materials in from one side of the building, finished product out the other side of the building? How do you arrange it, orchestrate it? That ability to take digital twins of shop floor and envision how could it work differently or better and rearrange, right? All being able to do, in an entirely different, much more immersive manner. And then those digital twins become a persistent thing. It's not something that just goes away when you go break ground on the construction site, but then becomes a persistent management tool to have the data, the data hooks into having that persist and show the actual, the digital twin of the actual systems and shop floor moving and watching the data, watching the systems move and being able to do it from anywhere and talk about it with anyone, in a collaborative fashion.
That digitization sounds like it will lower the overhead of expanded stakeholder participation earlier in the process. It makes me think of the newest credit in the LEED sustainable building paradigm, which is for integrated planning, in which the tenants or end users of a building are invited to come and participate in the original architecture ideation. And there's resistance in the industry because of the expense and the time, and so builders too often aren't doing that, and then it leads to waste at the end when buildings have to be retrofit. But now in this metaverse context, it sounds like the barrier to entry for that expanded participation can be dropped substantially.
Yes, exactly. And being able to, the object persistence and the collaboration, being able to take it, the next step beyond, what virtual reality can do. And that's why the term metaverse is helpful. It needs to become helpful, right? The term itself is just wildly hyped, and there are lots of definitions, and we're trying to cut through that and simplify down through the use of these kinds of use cases, and to demonstrate actually the combination of technologies does create something different. So if I had a plea, right, it would be, let's all get together and decide on a simple definition that can strip through some of the hype, and and get us to focus on actual valuable uses of multiple technologies that are coming together. So we've got some work ahead of us. I have never found that the vernacular that one creates at the beginning of an innovation wave is all that helpful. We need to have the ability to drop it over time and choose better terminology.
Oh, that's interesting. That sounds wise. That said, hype is fun. And,
it is, yeah.
And I wonder if we could conclude.
My most arduous example of it, the thing that just irks me to no end, is and metaverse related, right? NFT. I mean, fungible tokens are as important as non-fungible tokens. And hey, why don't we focus on, we actually helped to found the, what's now called the Interwork Alliance, to focus on token standards and to create the standards around, tokens, so that we can have that interoperability and the like. Why don't we focus on token standards and drop kind of, the wildly misunderstood and mishyped NFT NFT is in my mind, a very regrettable term that's been issued because, fungible is as important. And And for years, we've been training and working with clients around the base notion of digital object. I much would have rather that the notion of digital objects was the thing that persisted. And so, as a community, right, we have to, we're gonna struggle in some of the regrettable things that are happening in some corners of the innovation wave, and the use of terminology that then bleeds into every other part of it. And so as an open plea, right, like slicing through the hype to the actual practical pragmatic language and value and use cases is super important.
Yeah, well, I do want to do a rapid fire feedback on what leading vendors are doing. But before we move off that topic, will you give us the quick elevator pitch on the value of fungible tokens?
Yeah, so let's start with the value of tokenization to begin with, right? So the contribution of blockchain to this innovation space is that ability for the first time ever to have a provably unique digital object that can have, that can be owned and can form the basis of a transfer of value. And whether that's a digitally native product, right? The complete, which the collectible space is all over right now, or the digital representation, the tokenization of a physical world product, right? The title to my house, right? Tokenizing that in me, or my identity credential. And so the value and focus of being able to have that provably unique digital object, and then the mechanisms by which you work with it and move it and share it and trade it is the foundation of the value, right? The notion of whether it's fungible or non-fungible is more complicated than people talk about it, and it's all about the construct that the issuer wants to ascribe to it. And let me use my favorite example as to why this is not straightforward. If you and I were in the same physical room and I took a US dollar bill out of my pocket and you had a US dollar bill in your pocket and we traded them, who cares? Dollar's a dollar, totally fungible from our perspectives. But actually, each one has a serial number on it, and the Secret Service actually cares to know that that individual dollar bill has not been counterfeited. And so, the binary blunt, a digital dollar, it would be, has to be, is a non-fungible token. Absolutely. In the fact that it can't, if you can copy and paste it, that would be bad. But you and I don't care in the exchange of whether you have that $1 bill or you have mine or I have yours, right? And so in the market, in the tokenomics and the market structures that are evolving, right, that notion of, do you want to create a digital twin of the Picasso and limit it and all the notions of value through scarcity? Sure, let's there's value in figuring that out, and also the nonsense of course, if your purpose is to just look at it, right? Anybody can look at it, and I can take a copy of that non-fungible token and display it. It's more complex than is hyped and is focused on in the media. I would argue that that notion of what you intend, the functionality of the token, is what's key, and that notion of it as either helping a community convene, being an access point to an experience, or something of actual, the tokenization of something that has actual value. These are all the rules that have to be defined within ecosystems as to how orderly market structures and custody and transactions need to be based. And so we're using far too blunt language in this space, and we need to get much more grounded in the actual use cases of what you want to achieve.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of blunt language, if we could conclude before shifting over to Q&A, I would love to hear your expert gut reaction, your first impression to the work of some of the leading vendors out in this market. Can we do that real fast in a rapid round?
Sure.
All right. So first, Meta. What says you?
The evolution to go from an individual experience to a collaborative experience is great. Getting it done in a way that matches our societal values, key.
Right on. Roblox.
love the engagement of the community. My kid, it's what my kids wanted for Christmas, right? They wanted gift cards to be able to, to spend in, Roblox. So we, the next generation, the inspiration of the next generation and that enablement of a whole new cadre of developers and the creativity of it, love it. The ability to take my stuff from Roblox and go somewhere else with it. Got to be on that product path and frontier.
Epic Games now, as of yesterday, also the owners of Bandcamp, right? They just bought Bandcamp. What's your take on Epic?
So I'm going to start to not talk about it, individual companies, because many of these are obvious sensitivity of they're all our clients. But one of the things that's wildly important is that big tech is in the space, right? You reference Meta. There's Microsoft is a massive player. Like there's a big tech is in this. New emerging tech is in this, and new emerging tech is growing at a pace like we've never seen. And so the engines that underpin this from a content perspective, whether it's Epic or Unity or all of the value from the gaming engine space to be able to create these immersive experiences, massively important.
Mm-hmm. Finally, how about Microsoft?
The impact that Teams had for us in COVID, and I will put it out there, right? That we have 675,000 people, right, in Accenture that are all on the same instance of Teams and Outlook, and so we are a massive team shop, and it has done wonders for us to be able to be successful in a COVID context and to be able to collaborate on whole new ways. They are, I think they're going to do amazing things in this space, for the enterprise and for convening. And so I'm very much looking forward to Mesh coming out and what it's doing. We've been building wonderful places off of AltSpace VR, and so just really looking forward to Mesh.
Fantastic. Well, David, thank you so much for this overview. May your work continue to make a positive impact on our organizations, on our lives individually, on our collective human and ecological experience. It's been a pleasure to get this deep dive into your work, albeit over just 45 minutes. And I see that there is a ton of activity over in the chat.
A flurry, as it were.
Oh. Fantastic.
So we will be pulling people's questions up from the chat. That was obviously a stimulating panel. You can tell people's minds are working now here at the end of the week. We had a lot of different conversations. I'm going to try to kind of combine a few things because I think we've had like a really active, long conversation. And I'm going to try to just grab some brief themes here, and then we'll go to direct questions that I can kind of identify out of the back and forth, because some of them were questions to each other too. But a lot of people mentioned Snow Crash. Someone mentioned Second Life. Underlying theme was, to what degree does science fiction that has come before, particularly Snow Crash, I think was mentioned multiple times, essentially predict exactly what we're seeing now, or what parts of it does it predict? And what do you think about that? And then two, a lot of different kind of questions all circulating around, why is this different from previous? Why is Metaverse any different than whatever Second Life was or other instances?
Yeah, there's a lot there. That's a whole panel in and of itself. But where do I start? We're obviously all inspired, we're in this really interesting state, right, where the pace of change in technology is only getting, was it Justin Trudeau said the pace of innovation will never be as slow as it is today, and that ability for futurists and Hollywood and authors and writers to envision that future, and then the role that they play in helping shaping how it comes to be based on their research and their thoughtfulness, et cetera, I think is massively important. I think the only thing that the only thing that I also focus on is and this is not a rebuttal in any way, but our ability to not simply neither digitize the analog process, which is happening a lot, right? And if I pull on that thread just for a second, right, the big box retailers, first instinct might be to create a duplicate of the big box experience with aisles of products to walk down, as thinking about what the potential is for the metaverse, but actually the leading ones that we've been talking about, talking to, we actually, why would you be constrained by that? Why wouldn't you actually say, how do I get my products and services into your kitchen? And because that's why be constrained by the physical world assumptions and orthodoxies. Similarly, I would hate for us to be constrained. We should be informed by, we should be inspired by, but not being constrained by the prior visions that have been so engaging and fun and mind-blowing, coming from authors in Hollywood and prior research. So I just, we should take the moment to use that as, use them as fodder for what are those societal values that we want to advance, and what are the basic principles and then the supporting laws and regulations and impacts. And so we should be totally inspired. We should be taking the key facets of all of those movies and books and writing, and using them to challenge ourselves to do to make this better, make it better. And avoid the negative direct, do our best to avoid the pitfalls of where it could take us.
David, that Accenture report, if I can jump in real quick, that we shared at the beginning, said that there was an opportunity to shift from brands marketing to consumers to brands marketing with consumers in the metaverse. So it'll go even beyond what the brands do themselves.
Absolutely.
And I think what you're just covering kind of ties into what Ty Carlson has been talking about a lot in the chat. And Ty used to be at Amazon, so it's kind of interesting. You were mentioning retail, but Ty, there's kind of a couple themes that you were asking, but a lot of it was kind of like explain who the customer is, and you were saying you don't see who the customer is. Do you want to come up, Ty?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think from a gamer perspective, I think there's something there that you may be able to get low-hanging fruit, but if I don't see this being oriented around the customer, right? This is being what I hear in the description are how companies are going to make money and how they're going to approach their customer and how they're going to do all this. You start from where the value is. What's the customer value, and who is the customer, and why do they want to spend out of their discretionary time? Why would they spend time here versus somewhere else? And there's the opportunity cost, and then the cost of having additional equipment around that kind of, the 3D consumer thing didn't take off because the cost jump was too high for the value. So I'm trying to figure out here what's the value here and who's the customer.
Yeah, so I think that has been the case. I think we're seeing a totally different behavior set emerging now. And so yes, with all of the push that from a 2D perspective, to be able to spin the object through two dimensions to see all around it, that's gotten better and better, and you can kind of experience the object. But that notion, here, again, I won't attribute names to it, but the collaborative shopping experience. If I have if I've actually done an actual 3D body scan of my body image, and I'm actually able to go to a virtual place to try on clothes that will actually show how they fit on my actual body, that's cool. But actually, this is quite my personality.
Amazon Fashion does that, by the way, right now, just to let you know.
It does, and now add that collaborative aspect of being, going shopping with your best friend and actually having them be able to stand next to you, and you see it on them and they see it on you, and discussing it. Or the notion we're working, some really interesting things coming from an automotive perspective of being able to, again, the whole notion of getting into the car, not just looking at it from the outside, being able to, change your perspective. This is, from an evolution perspective, I think the thing that changes, continuously changes, is the quality of the resolution of that experience, the functionality of the experience of being able to flip the button or turn it or twist it or show it in motion, show it in movement. But the collaboration of being able to be there with someone else, whether that's a service provider giving you advice and guidance on it and doing, and part of the sales, service, or support dimensions, or your best friend being there with you and being able to talk and collaborate with them at the same time as you're interacting with the product. I think that frontier is going to grow fast.
Thank you.
And I think we've got a little bit more time. I apologize if I'm skipping over anyone. I'm just trying to scroll through this chat and figure out whose questions came in when. But Rennie, you had a question about kind of, the different versions of Metaverse here. Do you want to come up?
Yeah, it's basically, I think I'm echoing something, is I don't know whether the persistence and ownership paradigm is even the right one to be thinking about the metaverse, right? Like there was the first in web 1 and web 2 of like race out and get your URL and lock down your web address, and now there's the get in there and build your alt space and all of that. And history is full of cultures that applied ownership paradigms to pre-existing cultures and really messing with them. So I'm just trying to understand, what was talked about yesterday. PCI talked about making human understandable black box, effectively turning black boxes into glass boxes. And when you described the metaverse here, you were talking about sort of data feeds. And so all of a sudden the vision of what's, if we can make human readable data streams, human readable, navigable, editable, writable data streams that can be experienced in different ways, to me, that's a very different paradigm for the metaverse than a super high polygon shit version of Second Life. And so I'm just trying to understand, it's maybe we're just thinking about it the wrong way. We're just applying historical paradigms to what is an opportunity to actually finally say those paradigms suck.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of the paradigms we're operating under suck. So we, the degree of creativity and dropping those orthodoxies, dropping those assumptions as to how it works today, or even how the first versions have been. The amount of change ahead of us, if we can drive that from what you're describing of being unbounded by those orthodoxies or the initial versions, we're going to be in a much better place.
Well, I feel like that's a good kind of philosophical note to end on here as we run out of time. Fantastic panel. Thank you guys. I think this is obviously almost a hot button issue right at this point. And I think we covered kind of a lot of the different territory that you'd want to cover. So great panel. You can always tell when it's an interesting panel because people go wild in the chats, and they did indeed here. So thank you everyone for joining us. We recommend that you stick around for our next session. It's going to be an interesting one.